Love her. Heard a great testimony. Got emailed to me. There was a gal who said that she, as a young girl growing up, her father was a polygamist, and she had several brothers, and all of her life, her entertainment was watching her father's entertainment was watching her brothers rape her, and she just grew up like that until she was 17, 18, 19 years old, and she finally received Jesus some years ago. She said when she came into the church, she said she was just really tormented with this whole, sexual perversion her whole life. Then she comes into the church where they never talk about sex, where no one ever acts like they have a sex drive, and she said, I just didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't fit. And so she walked with the Lord for about 2 years, and one day she said, I just got so tormented and so frustrated that I went to a house of this guy that I know that's the most violent gang member, the worst person I could find, and I asked him to take away my virginity. And she said, and I lived with him for 6 months, and finally after 6 months, she said, and she said every night when I would go to bed, I'd lay my head on the pillow and cry, and I would hear the Lord's voice say, "You're my beloved, and I'm yours." And she said, I didn't want to be the Lord's beloved. She said, I was dirty, I was filthy, and so she said about 6 months went by, and one day she just got the courage to get in her car and drive, and she drove for 3 hours, just drove away from the house for 3 hours, and she said she ended up moving in with a Christian family, and she said, but she was still just tormented all the time, just tormented with all the sexual issues. And she said one day she heard me speak in this certain city, and she said she got on the internet and she Googled purity, and she found my book. She said, I ordered your book, I got your book. She said, but when it came, she said, I was scared to death to read it. She said, what if I opened that book and the answer for my problem wasn't in that book? What if it was a book just for people to keep their virginity? She said, what if it just made me feel worse and more guilty? So she said, I just put the book on the shelf and didn't read it for months. And she said, then I decided that I was going to go back to that abuser. She said, I got in such a slump, I decided I'm going to go back to my old life. I'm going to go back to the guy who abused me, and I'm just going to ask him if I can move back in. She said, I went to bed that night with the intention of going back to the man. She said, I got up in the morning and I thought, before I go back to him, I'm going to read this book. I'm going to read this purity book. She said, I picked it up. I guess this was an accident at night. She said, I picked it up in the middle of the night, and she said, I started to read it. She said, I read it all night till the morning, till the sun came up. She said, I didn't like your book. I got so mad at it, I threw it on the floor. She said, I didn't like it at all. Didn't like your book. She said, I laid there crying in the morning. I just laid crying after I read your book. She said there was something about the book that just kept kind of like calling out to me. She said, so I picked the book back up, and I laid down on my bed, and I put it on my chest, and I pressed it into me as hard as I could. She said, as I pressed it into me, something happened. She said, something lifted off of me. She said, I began to get delivered, and all the impurity began to leave my life. She said it's been 3 months now, and I live totally, completely delivered. Isn't that an amazing story? I mean, just think of what had happened if she would have liked the book. Whatever. Anyway, we should probably pray for the message. Listen, even if you don't like the message, as long as you like the messenger or his boss or his boss's boss, you'll be all right.